almost worse that he was straight, you know, because what she's doing, she's really angry in the moment. I totally get it. And she's thinking, how can I insult this man that has done this terrible thing to me? And by the way, like, you know, I hope he gets convicted too. How can I demean him? I know, I'll call him gay because gay is so lower.
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today I've stumbled across this video where Piers Morgan interviews a woman named Elizabeth Kinney who was physically assaulted in the UK, ended up in the hospital with a skull fracture, and then she got arrested and prosecuted because of a word she used in a private text message while she was recovering. Then Piers brings in a panel with Brendan O'Neill, Marc Lamont Hill, Lewis Oakley, and Andrew Wilson. And let me tell you, things get heated when they start debating whether the government should have the power to police your private conversations. So, make sure you watch until the end, and please comment down below where you're watching from. I really love to see people from all over the world connecting in here. Alright now, let's get into the video.
Gay
happened in America.
Yeah.
Their First Amendment protects your right to be offensive if you want to be.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not, you know, it's one thing if you came in and said, yeah, I said all these things and I stand by it and I wanted to be homophobic, that's one thing. But you clearly, you were angry because of what had happened to you.
Mm-hmm.
You were in a hospital getting treatment for injuries sustained in what you say was an attack. And I don't know, obviously, about that side of it, but I'll take your word for it. And then you have 11 police officers charging into your home as you're having a bath.
It was very, very frightening. I've had nightmares and everything about it, and I've got cameras on my house and stuff. I keep them on and make sure the doors are always locked now, because it's not even the public that anyone needs to be scared of these days. It's the police.
Did you think you might go to prison for this?
Yeah.
Did they warn you might?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. 5 to 10 years.
That's what they said you may get?
Yeah.
Because that's the maximum sentence you could have got.
For hate crime.
Again, I mean, what were you feeling when you heard that?
I was devastated.
You've got kids.
I was devastated.
4 kids you have?
Yes.
How old are
they? 15, 12, 9 and 3.
I mean, it would have been devastating.
Mm-hmm. It was. And it still is now, to be honest.
Right. I mean, you end up, you're pretty guilty. You got a sentence to a 12-month community order with requirements you undertook 72 hours of unpaid work and 10 rehabilitation activity days, and you were ordered to pay £364 in costs, about $500. So you didn't go to prison in the end, which must have been a great relief.
Yeah, of course.
When you look back on the whole thing, though, what do you feel about it?
I feel upset. The fact that I feel like I'm scared to even. I'm even scared to say the word now. That's why I'm saying the word in question, because
that was Tucker Carlson's point. And the reason he kept saying it, I've known Tucker a long time, he wasn't saying it to be homophobic. He was saying it to make the point that he was in England and he didn't care about whether somebody was going to arrest him. He was suggesting that I didn't want to say it because I'm fearful of arrest. That wasn't the case. I don't like using that word full stop.
Neither do I.
Because gay friends of mine say it's offensive to them, even though many of them use it. But it's the same argument as the N word for black people, right? They use it amongst themselves to reclaim that word, as they put it, and I understand that argument. But if a white person uses it at them, it's obviously a disgusting, racist slur.
Yeah.
And I think we all know that, right? What's extraordinary about this is I was talking to my team, none of us realised that using this particular word that got you into so much trouble in a text message could ever lead to a potential prison sentence in this country.
Neither did I. It was shocking. And I'm still shocked now, if I'm honest. But obviously, I just believe that we all need to be careful with.
Well, do we? So that's an interesting question about this. Do we need to be careful, or do we need to fight back a bit about this? Is it right that you're sitting here too scared of saying that word, even in the context of talking about what happened to you, and not as a slur? You know, we live in a free democratic society. You should be able to say it in the context of what happened to you without fear of arrest, it seems to me. And yet I understand why you don't want to, because you were told you might go to prison for 5 to 10 years.
Not just that, obviously, it's not in my character. I did that after the assault, when I had a brain injury, and like you don't act like yourself, you act out of character when you've had an injury to
What did your gay friends say about this?
I've had some beautiful messages from one of my managers as well, saying that they know I am not homophobic, 100%. I am the most kindest, loveliest person. And to not take any notice about what's been said about me, and that everyone knows, and they've all got my back, and they're all on my side.
Did any of the police feel uncomfortable about this when they were?
No. Nobody's even asked me, am I okay after the attack? Nobody.
No one's followed up on the attack at all?
No.
I just find that extraordinary.
So do I. Especially in the courtroom when I got charged, and the judges, nobody. The judges could see the pictures, the messages that I sent with the injuries, which were quite bad. And still, I wasn't asked, was I okay?
Absolutely extraordinary. Elizabeth, thank you for coming in.
You're welcome.
I'm very sorry about what happened to you. Not least because you're just being very honest. You said, you had 5 minutes of rage because of what had happened to you. You lost your mind a bit, used some intemperate language. You clearly regret it. You wish you hadn't done it. But to go through all that in England in 2025 seems to me absolutely outrageous.
It is.
I wish you luck with everything.
Thank you.
And with
Thanks
your career.
very much.
Thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you.
For more on the other F word, joining me on the panel are host of The Crucible, Andrew Wilson, author of Bisexual The Basics and host of the Bisexual Brunch podcast, Lewis Oakley, host of Abet News, Marc Lamont Hill, and the author and chief political writer at Spiked, Brendan O'Neill. Well, welcome to all of you. Brendan O'Neill, let me start with you. I just did this extraordinary interview with Elizabeth Kinney, which I know you guys have all listened to. What did you make of that? I mean, I could barely believe what I was hearing.
I think it's obscene. I mean, if what Elizabeth's saying is true, and I have no reason to doubt that it is, it sounds like a real double wrong has been done here. Firstly, there is the fact that someone was arrested for saying a word. That should never happen, in my view, whatever word they use, even if they use it in public. But then secondly, she was arrested for using a word in a private communication.
This is exactly why the First Amendment exists. And I need everyone watching to really understand what just happened here. A woman in the UK got assaulted. She was physically attacked. She ended up in the hospital with a skull fracture and inflammation on her brain. And what happened to her attacker? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. No prosecution, no follow-up. Nobody even asked if she was okay. But here's where it gets absolutely insane. While she is recovering from this assault, she sends some angry text messages to somebody she believes was involved in causing this attack. And because she used one word in those private text messages, 11 police officers show up at her house. 11. Not one, not two. 11 officers burst into her home while she is naked in the bathtub. They did not knock. They did not wait. They just came in. And Piers said this. This would never have happened in America. He is absolutely right. Because in America, we have the First Amendment. We have constitutional protections that say the government cannot police your speech just because someone finds it offensive. That is the whole point. The founders understood something that apparently modern Britain has forgotten. Free speech is not just about protecting the speech you agree with. It is about protecting all speech, especially the speech that makes people uncomfortable. Now, here's what really got me. Elizabeth said this. It is not even the public that anyone needs to be scared of these days. It is the police. Let that sink in. A woman who was the victim of a violent crime is now more afraid of the police than she is of the public. That is what happens when you give the government the power to police language. That is what happens when you let speech laws run wild. The people who are supposed to protect you become the people you fear. And the psychological damage this has done to her is heartbreaking. She said this. I am even scared to say the word now. She cannot even say the word anymore. Not because she thinks it is wrong, not because she changed her mind, but because the government has traumatized her into silence. This is a woman who had a brain injury, who was in a hospital bed, who lashed out in anger after being attacked, and now she lives in fear of her own government. You have to understand, this is not about whether that word is offensive or not. That is a distraction. The real issue is whether the government should have the power to prosecute you for words you use in a private conversation. And the answer to that should be obvious to anyone who values freedom. It should be no. Brendan O'Neill nailed it when he said this. An outrage, completely and utterly obscene, really does take us into the territory of thought policing. That is exactly what this is. Thought policing. The government deciding which words are acceptable and which words will land you in front of a judge. And if you think this is just a UK problem, think again. There are people in America right now who would love to bring these kinds of laws here. They call it protecting people from hate speech. But what it really is giving the government control over what you can and cannot say.
An outrage, completely and utterly obscene. That really does take us into the territory of thought policing. If the state can pry on our private conversations, drag us into the dock for things that we say to friends or frenemies or enemies, whoever it might be, that really does take us into Orwellian territory where the government has the right to snoop on what we say to fellow citizens. I think that is outrageous.
Lewis Oakley, I mean, to start with, as a gay man, did you get offended?
Bisexual.
My apologies. As a bisexual man, are you offended by the F word?
Yeah, I think that it's definitely got connotations there that are offensive. I mean, it's used to demean people and say that, gay people are, subhuman, disgusting, less manly. And that's what's inferred by it. So when it's used as abuse for young kids, like young 15-year-olds that are being called this in the playground, yes, it holds meaning. It, leads to mental health issues. It leads to people feeling that there is something wrong with them.
But if it's not being used as a homophobic slur, in other words, it's not being targeted at a gay person, and her explanation was that where she lives in the north of England. Well, no, Marc, I'll come to you. You might laugh, but I know there are parts of England where they would definitely not consider this to be a homophobic slur. They would just do it as a bit of, as they would see it, quite harmless banter. Now, we can argue about that, but it's different to say the N-word over here, which everyone would have a clear idea about. I don't think that this F word is seen in quite the same context, hence why she used it here, but not in a way that could be remotely construed as homophobic, which then begs the question, why has she been prosecuted for a hate crime prompting hate at gay people?
Can I just say, I think that it's almost worse that he was straight, because what she's doing, she's really angry in the moment. I totally get it. And she's thinking, how can I insult this man that has done this terrible thing to me? And by the way, I hope he gets convicted too. How can I demean him? I know, I'll call him gay, because gay is so lower, gay is so anti-masculine. Exactly. And that's the whole point. That was the word there's 1,000 other words she could have used to describe it.
But she says she's not homophobic and wasn't saying it as a gay slur.
Okay, but so what's that? You want to say that people that use the N-word to describe people aren't racist? It's just their banter between their friends?
Well, no, because I think there is a qualitative difference in severity of these words.
And Brendan keeps going. And this is the part that should terrify everyone. He said this: that really does take us into Orwellian territory, where the government has the right to snoop on what we say to fellow citizens. Orwellian. And he is not being dramatic. George Orwell wrote 1984 as a warning, not an instruction manual. The whole point of that book was to show what happens when the state gains control over language and thought. And here we are in 2025, watching it play out in real time. The UK government is literally monitoring private text messages and arresting people for using words they do not approve of. Think about that for a second. These were not public statements. This was not a tweet. This was not a Facebook post. This was a private text message between two people, and somehow the state got involved. Somehow the police decided that 11 officers needed to storm into this woman's home because of words she typed on her phone in a moment of anger after being assaulted. And then Lewis Oakley says something that completely exposes how twisted this whole mindset has become. He said this: I think that it is almost worse that he was straight. She was thinking, how can I insult this man? I will call him gay because gay is so lower. Wait, worse that he was straight? So let me get this straight. According to this logic, if she had used this word against someone who is actually gay, it would be less bad? How does that make any sense? This is the kind of pretzel logic you have to twist yourself into when you are trying to justify speech policing. And here is what people need to understand. The progressive argument here is that even if you do not intend something to be offensive, even if the person you are talking to is not even part of the group you are supposedly offending, it is still a hate crime. That is insane. That means your intent does not matter. Context does not matter. The only thing that matters is whether someone, somewhere, decided to be offended. This is why free speech advocates have been warning about this for years. Once you start down this road, there is no logical stopping point. First, it is public speech. Then it is social media. Then it is private messages. What is next? Are they going to start monitoring phone calls? Reading your emails? At what point do we say enough is enough?
I mean,
So
Marc,
race is more important than sexuality.
well, it's an interesting, arguable point. I mean, Marc, look, I would never use personally that F word. I would certainly never use the N word privately or in public. There probably is a qualitative difference between the two, I would say. Most people might think that. Certainly in England, I can imagine a lot of people using it, playgrounds and stuff, and not intending it to be a homophobic slur, not even knowing it is. So it's not as clear cut as you might think it is. But regardless, as Brendan said, regardless of whether you think it is or isn't, the idea that you communicate that word in a private conversation to someone via text message who you know, and the next thing, 11 police officers are charging into your house to arrest you, that can't be right, surely.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. So you raised 2 points. The first one, where I disagreed with you, wasn't whether or not people saw it as a homophobic slur. My point is something can be a homophobic slur or a racist slur or an anti-Semitic slur or whatever, even if a person doesn't realize that that's what they're doing. In the United States, I've spent a lot of time in locker rooms as an athlete. I spent a lot of times in fraternity houses. I spent a lot of time just in my neighborhood. And that word was used a lot. And it was often used not against gay people, although it certainly was used against gay people. It was also used against ostensibly straight people, as my colleague just said, for the purpose of demeaning, for joking. Sometimes it wasn't even an intense joke. Sometimes it wasn't outrage. It was just it was used ostensibly in a playful way. But the idea is, if the best way to mock you or to tease you or to make you seem less like a man in a society where being a man is the height of humanity is to call you gay,
but
then
you'd never be arrested.
But
hang on. You'd never be arrested in America for using that word, because the First Amendment would protect you. So you could be offensive in America in that way without actually treading into criminal activity, because the First Amendment is there to protect that very thing. Actually, it protects all speech, including hate speech.
So that's the second piece of it, right? I just wanted to address the idea of whether it's homophobic speech or not. But even if it's hate speech, let's say it rises to the level of hate speech, regardless, I don't think that the surveillance state should be overseeing us to decide when and where we're making the hate speech, even though I deplore hate speech. And then I also don't think the carceral state should be criminalizing or intensifying criminal penalties for using it. So yeah, it's awful to do. You shouldn't do it. But I could be the worst piece of human garbage on earth for using a word or a slur. It doesn't mean that I should get arrested for it. I think there's other ways to.
And here is where Marc Lamont Hill reveals the entire progressive framework on speech. He said this: something can be a homophobic slur even if a person does not realize that that is what they are doing. Do you understand what he just said? You can commit a hate crime without even knowing it. You can be guilty of spreading hate even if that was never your intention. Your own thoughts, your own context, your own meaning, none of that matters. What matters is how somebody else interprets your words. That is the standard they want to apply. This is genuinely terrifying when you think about the implications, because it means there is no way to protect yourself. You cannot say, well, I did not mean it that way. You cannot say the person I was talking to was not even gay. None of your defenses matter. The only thing that matters is whether the state decides your words crossed some invisible line that they get to define. And you know what is fascinating? Even Marc Lamont Hill, after making all these arguments about how words cause harm and how we need to protect people from offensive language, even he admits this. That does not mean that I should get arrested for it. So wait, he spent all this time arguing about how harmful these words are, how they contribute to violence, how they normalize discrimination. But even he thinks arresting people for it goes too far. That tells you everything you need to know. Even the people making the progressive argument cannot fully commit to the logical conclusion of their own position. And this is the problem with the whole hate speech framework. It sounds compassionate on the surface. We are just protecting vulnerable people. We are just stopping hate. But when you actually follow the logic, when you actually see what it looks like in practice, you get a woman with a skull fracture being treated like a criminal while her attacker walks free. You get 11 police officers storming into homes over text messages. You get people living in fear of their own government. The Founding Fathers understood something that too many people have forgotten. The government that has the power to silence speech you hate today has the power to silence speech you love tomorrow. That is why the First Amendment exists, not to protect popular speech. Popular speech does not need protection. It exists to protect the speech that makes people uncomfortable, the speech that offends, the speech that challenges. And if we ever lose sight of that principle, if we ever let the government decide which words are acceptable and which are not, we will have lost something that we can never get back. So what do you guys think of this? Leave your thoughts down in the comments. Please like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next video.